Boy, what a life to be bedridden, huh? Despite it not being my fault, I have partial paralysis. Mother-in-law freely throws insults my way. I'm not just lazing around at home, touching the computer all day without working. You're such a useless daughter-in-law. I swear. She might not understand, but this is my job now. Then you can't even have kids, can you? Who needs a daughter-in-law like that? Fine, I'll leave. Just as you wish. My name is Alice. I am 32. I guess you could say I am a novelist. I started writing in my 20s and have been publishing books under a pseudonym. Lately, they have finally started selling, and my income is becoming stable. My husband, Nick, is 35 and works at a publishing house. I met him during a meeting about the book adaptation of a novel I had serialized in a magazine for young women. We've been married for almost 2 years now, but no kids yet. It's not that we don't want children, but if they're not given to us, so be it. Right after we got married, I received several serialization offers, and the sales of my book started to rise, making me busy with bookstore promotion campaigns. It wasn't exactly the right time to be thinking about making babies. But considering our ages, I don't want to wait too long because pregnancy can be harder as you get older. Now that my work has settled a bit, I do find myself wanting a child. Since I write from home, I can continue to work while pregnant, consulting with my health as needed. It's easier since I'm not commuting to an office. Nick and I live with his parents in his childhood home. Mother-in-law Claire is 58 and works at a supermarket near the in-laws' house. Father-in-law Kendrick is 60, and it seems he's set to retire from his company this year. Nick is an only child, so living with Kendrick and Claire was a condition of our marriage. I didn't mind leaving my hometown or living with them, and agreed to it as long as I could continue my writing. The in-laws' house is a somewhat old 2-story wooden building, and we live upstairs. The stairs might have met the building standards back then, but they're pretty steep compared to newer houses, and they are scary enough that you have to be careful going up and down. It's not a completely separate household, but we're supposed to interfere as little as possible in each other's lives. Yet, within a month, I was treated entirely like a housekeeper. I am up before everyone else to clean. I start preparing breakfast before anyone else wakes up. Nick says Claire never made breakfast when he was little, but it seems she expects it from me. Innocently, the in-laws are thrilled to have a warm meal from the morning. At first, I thought it was okay if it made them happy, but it's unbearable to do it every day. After all, it takes away from my time for housework and cuts into my sleep if I want to get my work done. That's why some mornings are hard to get up. And still, Claire says, "Alice, you work from home, right?" It's not much different from being a homemaker. Everyone else works outside, so doing that much won't bring divine punishment. She doesn't lift a finger to help. Sure, I work from home, but I'm not playing around. Sometimes I struggle with writing ideas, and sometimes I need to go out for a change of scenery. Even while doing household chores, my mind is always running at full speed. It's frustrating not being understood by the in-laws I live with. From the beginning, Kendrick and Claire's only concern was whether I would produce an heir. "Alice, how old are you again?" 30, right? If only you were a bit younger," Claire would say without batting an eye. Kendrick too.
"Hurry up and show me your grandchild's face. If you want, I could even lend a hand."
He'd say things that sounded almost like sexual harassment. And Nick, you could have any young lady you want. I wonder why you ended up with an unsuccessful novelist.
Claire would say to my face, but I'm not an unsuccessful novelist. I published hardcover books. It's just that Claire wouldn't read the kind of books I write, so she wouldn't know. I can't help but think how someone can speak so freely about another person's job without knowing anything about it. It was when I was feeling down from these remarks that Nick approached me to talk about living expenses. The publishing companies hit a slump too. My salary's getting cut. You've been making more lately, right? Can you help out a bit? Nick told me that the in-laws' house was built by his grandpa, but because the land value skyrocketed over the years, the inheritance tax was a hefty sum. They had to take out a loan to pay it off, and they still owe money on top of the monthly bills in yearly property tax. It's just too much for Kendrick and Claire's income to handle. Since Nick's income was the most stable, he'd been covering it, and they'd ask him not to move out of the in-laws' house even before he got married. Being treated like a housekeeper and constantly berated, I honestly didn't want to agree. I can pay the money if necessary, but can't we live apart? I can't take it anymore. I turned Nick down with those words. What can I do? I'm the only son and the eldest. It's impossible. Nick said, looking sorry. I don't dislike Nick, but the thought of divorce began to cross my mind, unable to bear living with Kendrick and Claire any longer. However, I immediately dismissed the idea. After 2 years of marriage, Claire started to openly berate me for not having children. At first, I could laugh it off, but now my patience is running thin.
Don't you have kids yet? Maybe a daughter-in-law over 30 just won't do. Maybe there's something wrong with you.
I have my health checkups every year and gynecological exams too. There's nothing wrong with my body. But lately, I've been concerned about Nick's late returns. The making love that used to happen several times a week when we first got married has now become very infrequent. During the day, I'm busy catching up on housework, and I had to cut down on sleep to get everything done, which left me with little time for Nick, and I feel bad about that. But whenever possible, I've tried to respond to Nick's advances, even initiating at times. Lately, even when Nick comes home early and I make the move, sorry, I'm just tired. Maybe I'm getting old. Not tonight, he would say, not engaging. With the years ticking by since we've been married, I wish Nick would agree to get tested too if I don't get pregnant soon. But I couldn't bring myself to suggest it. I didn't want to seem like I was blaming him. Yet, I'm fed up with Kendrick and Claire's daily gripes about us not having a child. And as I am approaching my mid-30s, I heard it gets harder to conceive, which makes me anxious. One morning, I overslept by accident and heard Claire yelling from downstairs. I was so sleep-deprived from the daily chores and work till late at night that I just couldn't wake up. In a panic, I jumped out of bed and tried to run down the stairs with my mind still foggy. I slipped and tumbled all the way down. I think a loud noise echoed throughout the house, but I had no idea what had happened. Next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance. I could hear the paramedics talking but couldn't make out the words. Every part of me hurt, and I couldn't move. I felt my consciousness slipping away. When I woke up, I was in the hospital's ICU, laid up in bed, connected to all sorts of machines. It was like a scene from a medical drama, but it felt so unreal. The diagnosis was a compression fracture of the hip. I suffered nerve damage, and now I can't feel anything below my waist. It's like this isn't even my body anymore. The doctor said that even with a rehabilitation program, I probably won't recover and I'll have to live in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. That realization just plunged me into darkness. A month later, my fractures healed, but the severed nerves wouldn't reconnect. I remained paralyzed from the waist down and had to move back to my in-laws' house after being discharged. I got a certificate from my paralysis and received a disability ID card. I never imagined this would be me. If someone pushes me, I can get around in a wheelchair, but my in-laws' house is old and cramped, impossible to navigate. My husband and I moved into Kendrick and Claire's first floor room while they took the second floor. But Claire said,
"Useless and bedridden? Kicking us old folks upstairs? What a terrible daughter-in-law."
I spit it out. I felt so helpless and frustrated. Knowing the fall down on the stairs wasn't my fault. Tears just wouldn't stop. Luckily, my job is writing novels, which I've always done from home, so I can still write from bed. I switched to submitting my manuscripts electronically, so I don't have to hand deliver them or meet the editors unless it's absolutely necessary. They can come to me. Resuming work was a relief, but Kendrick and Claire don't seem to understand.
"All day just playing on the computer in bed? Must be nice."
Claire mocks me.
"Not only can't you bear an air, but you're bedridden. A burden. Practically trash."
Kendrick scoffs.
"You can't do household chores? Can't have kids? A daughter-in-law who's no use to anyone might as well leave."
Claire snaps without a pause. Then one day, Nick said something unbelievable.
"Hey, let's get a divorce."
I was stunned, disbelieving.
"With your condition, kids are out of the question, right? I can't live with a woman who can't have them."
The shock was like a blow to the head, worse than being paralyzed. I was too heartbroken to even cry. The next day, Claire said to me,
"You're divorcing my son, huh? Oh, thank goodness. It's miserable for him to be with a woman who can't have kids."
I hated the look on Claire's face as she said this while laughing.
"It would have been easier if he had just died when he fell down the stairs."
Is Claire serious? I started to get scared, thinking about what might happen if I don't leave soon. If something happens, I can't move easily because I can't control my body. And there's no one on my side at my in-laws' house. I contacted my disability support coordinator to urgently find me a new place to live. Luckily, I found a new place to move into quite quickly and was able to breathe a sigh of relief. It's a barrier-free one-bedroom rental apartment. I wanted to be as far from my in-laws' house as possible, but unfortunately, it was just in the next town. Still, eager to leave the in-laws' house as soon as possible, I decided to move in right away. The divorce mediation with Nick hadn't started yet, but I wanted to ensure my safety first. I decided to have the government official come over while my in-laws were out and proceed with the moving process in secret. I didn't even know there was such a helpline for domestic violence, but since my parents lived far away and I had no relatives nearby, it was a relief. There was also the fact that I had defied my parents' objections to become a novelist, so I couldn't rely on my family. I set the moving date
And during a weekday when everyone was away, I had my belongings moved to the apartment and I was transported there by a welfare vehicle. Living alone in the apartment, I asked for a helper to assist with my daily life. "Hello, nice to meet you." The helper, introduced by the office, was named Stella and seemed a bit older than Claire, but was energetic and cheerful. She used to work in a high position in a big company, but her husband became bedridden with a severe illness and she gave up her career for caregiving, retiring about 5 years ago. "Well, my husband passed away last year. Thankfully, he didn't suffer much." She spoke with a bright smile, but her eyes seemed somewhat sad. She decided to make use of her caregiving experience, got a helper certificate, and has been working hard. No wonder she seems so powerful. Just being around her made me feel like I could get energized. "Hey, Alice, I heard you're a novelist. What kind of stuff do you write? Tell me." When Stella asked, I told her my pen name. To my surprise, she exclaimed, "What? Alice wrote those? I read them. Hey, when you buy a book, can I get you autograph?" She was so delighted. She looked like she might jump for joy. "Okay, when my new book comes out, I'll give you a copy." I was happy to have a reader close by. "Alice, your divorce mediation isn't done yet, is it? My son just started his own law practice and is looking for work. How about it? Can you let him handle your case?" Stella offered. I had told her most of the circumstances of my move, but I was surprised her son was a lawyer. "Please, I'd appreciate your help," I answered immediately. Having been in my in-laws' house with no one to take my side, the appearance of someone reliable was reassuring. "It's unfortunate you're disabled, but you have your novels, Alice. And readers like me. Let's keep it up." I couldn't stop the tears. I won't be defeated by something like this. That's what I thought. "Sure, I'll trust the mediation to you. But is there anything else I can do?" I asked Stella. "Well," after thinking for a bit, Stella said, "your testimony alone would be fine, Alice, but we need a bit more. If your husband or Claire calls, how about recording it?" Indeed, it would be wise to keep a record of any communications from Nick or Kendrick. "Thank you. I'll give the voice recording feature on my mobile phone a try." I felt a little relieved, as if a weight had been lifted off my chest. From that day on, my mobile phone was bombarded with notifications of incoming calls from my in-laws' house from morning to night. Even though I hadn't completely unpacked yet, I decided to leave it be for a while. Besides, I wasn't in the mood to have a calm discussion with Kendrick and Claire or Nick just yet. After a week of moving into the apartment, I finally felt ready to answer one of the many calls. Of course, I had a recording feature turned on. Hello? I had barely spoken when... "Alice, where are you right now? You disappeared all of a sudden? You're not answering your phone. We were worried about you." Clear, shrill voice echoed in my ear. "Worried? Are you? Thanks for the concern, I suppose." My reply was dripping with sarcasm. "Of course! Why did you leave without discussing it with us?" Clear's voice had a panic tone as she questioned me. "I left because it seemed like the best thing to do. Isn't that what you wanted?" I retorted coldly. "That was just a joke! You know it was a joke! Please, won't you come back home?" Clear's voice was turning into a wail of desperation. "I'm useless, right? You don't need me, do you?" I continued to respond icily. "You're a successful novelist now, aren't you? I heard from Nick.
Your income has increased, right? You were contributing a lot to the living expenses, weren't you? For a long time, I had been paying most of the living expenses, but it seemed Claire hadn't noticed. Well, my current income averages about $20,000 a month, I guess. When I revealed my monthly income. That much? Claire sounded surprised, but it was too late now. I plan to discuss the divorce with Nick, so it's none of your concern anymore, I said decisively, and Claire raised her voice on the other end of the phone. You should have just died when you fell down the stairs. Then I could have had insurance money by now. Claire had let it slip, and I hadn't missed it. What did you say just now? As I began to speak. Oh, that was nothing. Anyway, I'm in trouble here. Come back home. Claire denied it, but I had recorded the entire conversation. I understand. I've recorded this conversation and will use it for the upcoming lawsuit, if that's okay with you. I spoke in a businesslike manner. There was no room for sympathy anymore. They had been planning something with my life insurance, which meant I had more than just the divorce to discuss. Just wait, I'm sorry. I'll apologize, so please don't sue me. Claire's screams came through the phone speaker, but I mercilessly hung up. The next day, Stella arrived with a man in a suit. Alice, this is my son, Scott. The man introduced as Scott bowed politely and greeted me. He looked to be about Nick's age. He had recently left the law firm he worked at to start his own. I have taken the liberty of conducting an investigation into Nick's conduct. Scott pulled out a large envelope from his bag, placing several photos and documents in front of me. It appears Nick has been having an affair with a woman from his workplace. Do you recognize this woman? I recognized her indeed. When we met the new recruit at the planning meeting for the new series, introduced by Nick, I had no idea it would lead to this. The reason for his late return became annoyingly clear. I had informed Scott about the call from Claire yesterday and let him listen to the recording. I wanted to know his legal opinion. After listening, Scott closed his eyes, deep in thought. This could suggest insurance fraud, he said, opening his eyes and furrowing his brow sternly. Just then, the doorbell chimed. Oh, I'll get it. Stella stepped out to greet the visitor. Yes, who is it? Oh, please, wait a moment. She sounded flustered. But who could it be? Alice, it's Nick. What do you want to do? Stella asked me. It seemed like a good time with the lawyer there, so I said, Please, let him in. Stella passed on my message. Nick appeared, looking utterly drained. Alice, why did you suddenly disappear? I was worried. He spoke as if relieved. It's impressive you found this place, considering I kept it secret. I locked eyes with Nick as I said it. I couldn't get information from the hospital or any office, so I had to ask around before I finally found you. Nick sounded pleased, but his words no longer reached my heart. Thank you for looking, but you have a young and cute girlfriend, don't you? My words were dismissive. We broke up. It turned into a rumor at the office and she quit. I had to take responsibility. Nick's voice was pitiful, but I couldn't care less. Self-inflicted woes. So what? Chase after her? She's likely to give you children. That would be just right for you. I spoke my mind clear and sharp. I might be transferred and there's not enough money from my parents' house. It's tough. I was hoping you'd help. Please, come back. I beg you. Nick pleaded with deep remorse. What a pathetic man. It's embarrassing to think I was once his wife.
With a phone call from Claire, suspicions of insurance fraud had been raised. So please, discuss this with Scott, the lawyer here, along with our divorce mediation.
I introduced Scott, who stood beside the bed, to Nick. Nick was stunned, motionless, then eventually left the room supported by Scott.
Half a year passed, and my divorce from Nick was finalized. He had been involved with his affair partner for over a year. With irrefutable evidence, no room for argument, my demands for compensation were fully acknowledged. Kendrick and Claire faced police interrogation under suspicion of insurance fraud. Nick, involved in my life insurance policy, was also questioned for his involvement in the case. The beneficiary of the insurance was Nick, planning to use it to pay off debts and living expenses. Ultimately, the entire in-law family was charged with attempted insurance fraud, avoiding jail but receiving probation. Kendrick lost his retirement benefits due to this, and Claire was fired from the supermarket. Nick, though on probation, was laid off and now works day labor from morning till night. To pay off past debts, my compensation, and the costs for my injury and treatment, the in-laws' house was sold. The land was valuable, but after all payments, not a penny was left. Despite all our efforts, I heard they were still short on cash and had to continue paying up debts while living together in a cheap apartment. My novel has not only been published in print, but also started to be distributed as an ebook, leading to increased sales despite the so-called publishing recession. I become quite accustomed to submitting my work via computer, and the opportunities to interact with readers online have grown. On a personal note, I've started dating Scott. I had assumed he was married because he had that popular, dapper air about him, but surprisingly, it turned out he's single. He's been so focused on studying for the bar exam since college that he didn't have time for relationships. Stella teased me but also gave her blessings. It's sad that I've become paraplegic, but I'm determined not to give up and to keep fighting.